128 days. That is how long it has been since Ilja Dragunov has wrestled a match. 4 months and 6 days. Since he was eliminated from the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal on the SmackDown before WrestleMania, which left us all to speculate for months on why this man wasn't on TV. Some people thought it might be injury related. It was not. He's been at the dungeon with his girlfriend training with Natty and the rest of the folks there. No signs of any injury, no reports of any injuries. Some people thought maybe it was visa related, right? A lot of wrestlers in WWE and AEW have been affected by delays to their work visa renewals. Maybe he was one of them. But 4 months is an awful long time to be waiting when most everybody else has already been back at work. Maybe he got beamed up to an alien spacecraft. I mean, that would make about as much sense as anything else. Well, now we have an update. The Mad Dragon is gone from WWE. Ilja Dragunov's deal with WWE has expired. He was removed from their internal roster this week, per PW Insider. And I noticed that he has since been moved to the alumni section on WWE.com. WrestleVotes actually had an update before all this. It was during a Q&A session. Joey Votes and TC of WrestleVotes, they addressed Dragunov's disappearance. TC said the issue was much bigger than creative simply having nothing for him. It came down to analytics. He said they rely on analytics so much, and if these numbers look bad against you and not in your favor, they won't use you as much. Some of these guys are feeling the effects of WWE's new Moneyball approach, where they take numbers, analytics, and reporting. People turn off the TV when this guy is on. They don't click his name. WWE utilizes these more than anyone will ever know. These guys are really hurting because of that. His merch is nothing. He's had 1 or 2 shirts, so there's no, man, I really like this guy, I'll buy his t-shirt. He's not a priority. And then in this week's Wrestling Observer newsletter, Dave Meltzer reported that Dragunov signed what was termed a very good contract and it was coming due. And in talks for a new deal, the sides were far enough apart that the decision was made in April not to use him anymore. It was essentially conceded that he was a great worker, but not a numbers mover, and evidently for the level of money he was asking and getting, you needed to be a numbers mover. Basically, repeating what TC from WrestleVotes already said. Brian Alvarez said the two sides were said to be strongly negotiating a return as recently as June. False Finish reported the WWE was planning to bring Dragunov back to television after SummerSlam. So the reporting on this has been a little all over the place. You got Dave saying that they took him off TV in April because they were so far apart on the numbers. And then you got False Finish saying that they were planning on bringing him back to TV after SummerSlam. Those are two very different reports. The money stuff would be the most sensible explanation as to why he's been missing from TV for the last 4 months, because nothing else makes any sense. You know, here's a man who tore his ACL and he missed 13 months of his career, right, to fight his way back. And in his first match, he beat Sami Zayn to win the United States Championship. And then he went on a great run of matches over the next few months. That U.S. title open challenge gimmick that Sami Zayn revived back in September was the highlight of that show for months. He passed it on to Dragunov, who then passed it on to Carmelo Hayes. Dragunov had some great matches with Nathan Frazier and Axiom and JD McDonough and Tommaso Ciampa, and then he lost it later on to Hayes, another guy who was brought to SmackDown as their number 1 draft pick and summarily buried deep in the mid-card for months and months. And it was only after they put the U.S. title on Melo that he had the chance to really start getting over with the crowds. You know, he got over based on his in-ring input. And it was the same thing with Dragunov. Now you can say, oh, he didn't show much of a personality on TV, but I mean, fucking A, he knew how to go out there and find a way to get the crowd invested in his matches. Even if they were quiet at the beginning, by the time they were over, he had them. And it felt like, okay, this is working. This is something that we can build on here, right? After he drops the belt, hopefully they can get him involved in some stories now instead of just having random open challenge matches, because that was always going to have a short shelf life. But this is something that we can build on. And they did a little story, if you could call it that, where he lost his confidence. Melo was trying to, tell him, you're Ilja Dragunov. He's trying to pump him back up. And eventually he found his confidence, but then he lost to Melo again. And that was it. He never did anything else of significance again on the show. But it goes back even before that. It goes back to the Royal Rumble and that spot with Brock Lesnar, where he delivered those chops to Lesnar in the corner, these hard knife-edge chops, and Brock just stood there and no-sold it. And he screamed in his face, may as well have laughed in the man's face, before dumping him out of the ring like a sack of garbage. How do you watch something like that and your big takeaway is somehow this is a positive for the guy? He never even so much as won another match on TV after that. He got beat by Tama Tonga, he got beat by Mello, and he got dumped out of the Andre Battle Royal by Aleister Black, who doesn't even work there anymore. Something happened, unrelated to his contract status, because at that point, his contract wasn't up for another 7 or 8 months. From December until that Battle Royal, something happened, something changed that soured them on him. Again, TC of WrestleVotes said that it was the analytics. They simply weren't in his favor. It's their Moneyball approach. Yes, the same Moneyball approach that won Billy Beane exactly 0 championships. Let's rely on the Moneyball approach with WWE. The thing about those metrics and analytics is that you're only as good as the opportunities that are afforded to you, right? I can't speak to what the quarter hours looked like when Dragunov was on TV or what his merch numbers were. Best as I can tell, he had 1 t-shirt. That was it. But with those live crowds, he was getting over. He was getting over and they squandered it because the only way something has a chance to work is if you keep at it. You keep giving him consistent TV time. You try to build on that and create some momentum for the guy. He had 1 win on television this year. That was in January against the fucking Miz. They gave up on this guy faster than a Gunther tap to Jey Uso at WrestleMania last year. Why? Because he didn't have a catchphrase they could slap on a t-shirt? Dragunov was one of the best wrestlers bell to bell in the entire company. Every time he was in that ring, he would sell his ass off. Like he was in the fight of his life. He had an intensity about him that made him stand out from everybody else. And he ended up on the same roster with Gunther, the man that he beat to win the NXT UK Championship. The wars those men had, if we're being honest, they were never going to be able to top those on the main roster. But that doesn't mean you don't run that feud back. Gunther would have been the perfect opponent for him. Those two would have brought out the best in each other. And even if he would have lost in the end, I think it would have really helped level him up on that roster. Right now, would have been the perfect time to do it because Gunther has no real direction either at the moment, right? What's he doing? He's not doing a whole lot of anything right now. They have him out there wrestling Matt Cardona in his slacks. The same Matt Cardona who hasn't won a match on SmackDown since January. Sound familiar? Now we see where they had him slotted this entire time. If I worked for that company, that's not the spot that I would want to be in if I were him. But this would have been the perfect time for Gunther and Dragunov to work together, except it sounds like Dragunov already had his mind made up that he was leaving. And why wouldn't he? He's not a stupid guy. He could see the writing on the wall. They put a ceiling on him. And evidently didn't feel that he was worth the money that they were paying him. Why would he stay? Why would he sign a new deal for presumably less money just to sit on the bench for the next 3 years or until they swept him out the door with the rest of the Expendables? I don't blame him for wanting to leave, and here's why. And maybe this is the realization that he came to. Danhausen is somebody, I mentioned that his merch numbers weren't there. Well, Danhausen is the opposite. Danhausen is selling all kinds of merch, and that's why they were just abusing him on television. They were featuring him so much. I'm happy they've dialed it back a lot with him. But you want to use Danhausen as an example, or Jey Uso, right? I'm sure he's a merch machine too, all the Yeet stuff. This is no longer a pro wrestling company. And I'm not saying that this is some new thing I just realized. It's been that way for a while now, especially under TKO. WWE is not a pro wrestling company. Ilja Dragunov is a professional wrestler working for a company that does not put a priority on professional wrestling. So he wasn't a good fit for them. And I think he realizes that, and he decided, you know what, my services would be better off being put to use somewhere else. WWE's usage of Dragunov at the start of this year is more of a self-fulfilling prophecy than anything else. If they believe something to be true, many times they will end up finding a way to prove that they were right. Oh, he doesn't draw. Or, oh, the analytics aren't supporting him. Yes, well, when you vanish from television, you become a ghost. That's not going to make the analytics go up. How long are they giving these guys before they give up on them? 6 weeks? There are others far less talented than him that have been given chance after chance after chance to get over on TV. You'll get that chance if you're one of their favorites. And if you're not, then you won't. You can't take somebody off television for weeks or months on end and expect people to give a shit. Consistency is key. This is true of WWE. It's true of AEW, which has an enormous roster of talent, many of whom can't get consistent TV time because there are only so many hours of television and they just have far too many people under contract. So people fall through the cracks or they get on TV and then we don't see them again for 6 weeks. How can you expect someone to get over that way? You can't. It's not possible. It tells the audience that you don't matter. You're not a priority. So something happened earlier in the year that basically caused them to give up on him. And again, I don't care that in April they made the decision to take him off TV or keep him off TV. He was already mostly off TV because, we're far apart on the numbers. Forget April. This goes back long before that. This predates April. That's why I say something happened here. They gave up on the guy far too quickly. I thought it was very telling during the WrestleMania bill when they had Pat McAfee on television. They put a live mic in his hand, and he's on television complaining about how he has to watch 2 5'5" guys doing a 45-minute Iron Man match 10 weeks straight for no rhyme or reason. And people took that as a shot at AEW, and maybe it was. But it also makes me think about all those U.S. title open challenges with the smaller guys that we were seeing on SmackDown for months in the lead up to that, and people like Dragunov and Mello, who made that show watchable. Far more watchable than Pat McAfee did. But yes, they don't look like Baron Corbin, who's 6'6", walks in, wins the U.S. title, already has a couple of wins over Trick Williams. They don't look like Big Cass, who's 7 feet tall, and you can't teach that. And he's out there on television destroying people every week. Yes, he's not that. But what does it say about them that they would even allow something like that to be said on their TV? It's not like they've done much since then to prove McAfee wrong. I guarantee you this is how some of the people sitting in that writer's room think, if not Triple H himself. Which is wild to me considering all of the success that he had, with NXT Black and Gold. You would think that he would give these guys a little bit longer of a leash before, giving up on them because he knows what these guys can do. They brought him a lot of success all those many years ago, and you can't tell me that with the right story and the right people put together that they can't find that same success on the main roster. I'm not even saying that these guys are going to be in the CM Punk position or the Roman Reigns position as the World Heavyweight Champion. I'm not saying that. But you see how some of these guys are used or not used and how quickly they give up on some of them. And it's just depressing to watch. Dragunov choosing not to take whatever it was that they were offering and allowing his contract to expire tells me that he knew he had no future there if he stayed. So my hope for him is this. My hope for Dragunov would be, honestly, that he gets a Mike Santana-like run. And what I mean by that is Mike Santana also missed a lot of time due to a torn ACL. He missed 14 months. Dragunov missed 13. And when Santana came back to AEW, he didn't spend much time there after that because he wasn't happy there. He also saw the writing on the wall and said, there's no way I'm ever going to find any real success as a singles here. This roster is too bloated, or maybe he felt Tony didn't see him in that same light. I don't know what it was, but he knew that his future was bleak. If he had set certain goals for himself as a singles wrestler, AEW was not going to be the place to achieve those goals. And if he wanted to get an opportunity to find success on his own, he would have to do it somewhere else. So he left. And he worked the Indies, he worked TNA, and he got himself over as a world champion. Enough so that WWE came calling. So obviously the guy did something right. Dragunov is only 32 years old. Who's to say he won't end up back in WWE at some point? His style seems like it would be a better fit elsewhere anyway, because pro wrestling is the guy's strong suit. That's his bread and butter. I think his style would fit perfectly in a place like Japan. Imagine Dragunov in next year's G1. But he's not going to make the money in Japan that he was making in WWE, and if they were so far apart on numbers here, money is going to be a factor. I don't know that they could afford someone like him. I mean, why do you think so many guys have left Japan to begin with? Because they want to make money. Same with TNA. What could they really afford to pay him? Japan or AEW? I'm guessing we'll see him in that Casino Gauntlet match at Wembley next weekend because he's free and clear right now. He can pop up wherever he wants. When your contract expires, there's no non-compete, there's no 90 days. That's only when they give you a notice that they intend to release you. That's not what this was. So he's free and clear. He could show up tomorrow. He could show up anytime, anywhere he wants to. And there just so happens to be a big show coming up in London next weekend. Would not shock me. It's a running joke at this point about Tony Khan signing all of these ex-WWE guys. You know, he signed the Motor City Machine Guns to debut them in Detroit last month. And I mean, what have they done since? They haven't even had a match yet. But whether it's Sheamus or the New Day, certain guys are a no-brainer. Dragunov, to me, is a no-brainer to work with the people that Tony has on that roster. I mean, are you kidding me? Look at the roster of talent Tony Khan has, and then picture Ilja Dragunov going out there and doing what he does best and working with those people. And sure, he'll probably just end up as a collider on Saturdays, right? Is that what they are? They're colliders? As long as they don't just toss him into the fucking Don Callis family, then he'll probably do okay. But AEW seems like it would be a better fit for him anyway. Plus, I love the idea of him being in this year's Continental Classic. Just selfishly, I think that would be fucking great if he ended up in that tournament. And keep in mind, you know, working with AEW, he could still work Japanese dates if he wants to. He could work dates for CMLL or Indies. At least he can work. Anything is better than nothing. The Indies would welcome him. That much I will tell you. And they may be welcoming a lot of other people soon also, if Brian Alvarez is to be believed. On Wrestling Observer Live on Thursday, Alvarez said this: "There are a few other WWE main roster contracts of people who have not been on TV coming due in October. As for AEW, I've been given the impression that there are a lot of contracts that Tony is not going to cut, but they will quietly expire. There's going to come a time, 6 months or a year down the road, where there's going to be a lot of people available. I think either the Indies will blow up again or some other promotion has got to come along and see what they can do. This quote-unquote glory period of 2020 to 2025, where if you had any name whatsoever, you were signed somewhere making a lot of money, those days are coming to an end." This was inevitable. You know, AEW was only going to be able to take so many people. There was always going to be a reckoning at some point. While, you know, also they pay people to do absolutely nothing in some cases. You never see them at all on TV, but obviously Tony is paying them. And WWE under TKO, unless you're a top star, they're not going to pay what they were paying under Vince McMahon years ago when they were trying to keep talent away from AEW. Tony has always done that. Like that aspect of AEW where Tony's not going to cut them, but he's going to quietly let their contracts expire. That is not news. That is Tony Khan's MO. Rarely does he release or fire someone unless they either request it and then it's 50-50 if he grants it, or if there's some sort of disciplinary reason for him doing so. And again, that's very, very rare, but there have been occasions where that's happened. But generally speaking, this is what he does. He'll pay you, he'll honor your contract and pay you, but if he doesn't want you, he'll just let it quietly expire. Which, I mean, look, at least he's honoring the deal he made with you. I'm not a big fan of him keeping people under lock and key who he's not using, who are desperate to leave. And we've talked about that in the past, whether it's Rey Fenix or Ricky Starks or people like that. But at least he's honoring the deal that he made with you. That's more than I can say for WWE. They'll sign you to a 5-year contract and then turn around and fire you 6 months later. There's no such thing as job security if you work for WWE. They expect you to honor your commitment, but it only works one way. They can terminate their commitment to you whenever they feel like it. You do the same to them, they'll take your ass to court and they'll bankrupt you, which is why rarely does anybody challenge them on anything. But I look at that roster, you know, if you're someone like Jordan Grace or Johnny Gargano laying on a crate every single week, I genuinely wonder how much time they really have left there. You know, if you're not being used, you're on the bubble. It's as simple as that. Even if you are being used, as we saw with Kairi Sane, you're still not safe. For AEW, there was news this week that they're that they might be considering a return for Britt Baker for their special Rebel Heart episode of Dynamite on September 9th. Since Britt and Rebel, they're good friends, and that episode is to honor Rebel and raise awareness for ALS. Maybe we'll see Britt Baker back on television next month. But Britt Baker is definitely one of those names where I think Tony just runs her deal out, and when it expires, she's gone. He hasn't used her in 2 years. She hasn't wrestled at all in 2 years. I don't know what that's about. I don't know what's stopping her from booking some indie shots here and there if she wanted to work indies. She clearly doesn't want to, because if she wanted to, she'd be out there. But yeah, there will come a point very soon where a lot of these wrestlers, unless they are a major name off TV, they're going to find that the money may not be as good as it once was. That well is going to dry up a little bit. TNA is not going to be able to afford them. I mean, they may pick up a few people, but you see what TNA is doing. You see these same reports that I see. They're signing so-and-so, and this isn't universal. Some people will sign maybe a longer-term deal, but so many of these contracts are short-term, like 90-day deals, 4 months, 6 months. They can't make the kind of long-term financial commitments to people that WWE and AEW can. So TNA is an option. Is TNA a viable option? Not for all of these people, it's not. Without AEW, imagine how much worse it would be. That's why WWE counter programs against them. It wants to run them out on a rail. I think it all boils down to one thing: money. And AEW driving up wrestler salaries these last 6 or 7 years, they want them gone, or at least weakened, so those salaries can normalize again. They want it to go back to the way it was before AEW ever existed, where they're the only big game in town, and they'll offer whatever they think you're worth, and not a penny more. The bubble was bound to burst.